In life, there are few times where products are built that cross oceans and mountains and that dramatically reduce the anger felt throughout the world on a daily basis. Personally, there's only about 5 products in the world that I count next to my children and my family as kind of critically valuable to me in my life. And Waze is one of those. If you have an app that is getting you from one place to another, and you're with me and it is not Waze, I become the meanest, most irate, angry person ever, and I don't stop until you put on Waze. The product has saved me so many times, and we are so thrilled to have Noam Bardin here, who is the founder of Waze, and we're thrilled to have Jack Nicas from the Wall Street Journal to interview him. Let's give him a big startup grind welcome, you guys, for Jack and Noam. Let's hear it.
All right, good afternoon. So, tough to top that intro, but I think it is difficult to overstate the impact of Waze in the tech community. I think a lot of the startups obviously know this app, probably used it this morning to get here, or your Lyft or your Uber driver did. And Noam and I were tasked to originally talk about a topic, something like charting user-driven growth or something like that, and we both decided that there's a much more interesting topic, and that is this extremely interesting new venture that Waze is embarking on, and that is called Waze Carpool. So has anyone here ever heard of Waze Carpool? Show of hands. Okay.
All right.
I guess I have as well. All right. So there's like 10 people reading my story, so that's a good sign. To introduce this topic, Noam did bring a video, and then I'll let him chat a little bit about it. So why don't we show that?
Here at Waze Labs, we've been looking for new ways to beat rush hour traffic. We explored every possible solution. At last, we noticed something astonishing. It appears a vast majority of cars have more than one seat already built in. So if commuters ride together, everyone can beat rush hour traffic. It's called Carpool. Yes, we know we didn't invent it. However, calculations show that finding and organizing a carpool is such a hassle, most of us just won't do it. That's where the new Waze Carpool service comes in. You see, every day, millions of drives are already happening with Waze, the largest community of drivers on the planet. Waze analyzes these drives and automatically eliminates all rides except the best one with the closest start and end points, commute timing, and real-time traffic conditions. So pick-up and drop-off detours are minimal, and the entire carpool experience is easy and hassle-free. And everyone wins. Just by pitching in for gas, riders get a comfortable and affordable ride. And drivers cover their gas costs just by helping someone on the way. It's Carpool, powered by Waze. And here's the big picture. Since Waze Carpool makes the most of a drive that's happening anyway, you're actually helping reduce cars on the road and greenifying your daily commute. Ready to carpool with Waze? Give a ride with Waze, or get a ride using the new Waze Rider app.
All right. So you've got some fans here at least. So Noam, Waze has been such a successful app for so many years, but it really has been kind of a one-headed monster. And now you're adding potentially new business cases here. You're going to have to process payments. You've got social aspects. You've got potentially regulatory hurdles. This is a whole new ballgame for you. Why do this?
So at Waze, our tagline was always outsmarting traffic together. And I think we did the maximum we could in terms of helping our users find the best way, save them as much time. But we're running out of options. As we've grown, we're optimizing the road network to the maximum. And there are only so many shortcuts you can make, and at a certain point, you really run out of options unless you can take cars off the road. And so we see this very much as an extension of our mission. Right? We've been trying to help the individual Wazer, and now we're going to try to help society on the whole by literally fighting traffic. And if you look at the distribution of traffic at peak time in the Western world, We're talking about a relatively small percentage of cars that if you can convince their drivers to leave those cars at home, you can actually get to free-flowing traffic. And that's really what we're going to try to do.
Okay, so Uber and Lyft, they've been around for several years. Lyft was 2012, I think Uber was 2009. Extremely popular here. Why now? Why did it take this long? If you already had this community of riders, you had the app capabilities, you've got Google's backing. Why now?
So I think there are two aspects of that. One is really the timing. People have been trying to carpool, the US government at least has been trying to promote carpool since the Second World War, and definitely in the 70s and 80s. And it seems obvious, it's a no-brainer, right? We have all these empty seats in the car, get another person in there. Why hasn't this been done before? And it's actually a very, very difficult problem to solve because the value you're creating for each individual user is very small. And the pain that you're creating is just enough to make this a hassle. And so our challenge is how do we make this seamless enough that it will be just part of your daily commute and what you do every day, but at the same time actually get people to go a little bit out of their way. So it's a pretty big social challenge that we have there. There's a lot of question around the social relationship. Getting into someone else's car is obviously a weird situation, something you may not know. I think the timing is right for several reasons. The biggest really is the sharing economy. The fact that today to get into a stranger's car, if you think about Lyft or Uber, something that we're kind of used to, at least I'm used to doing that. And sleeping in someone's house or renting someone's house with Airbnb, or a variety of other of these sharing economy environments that are really getting us used to using other people's infrastructure, but also allowing us the tools to rate users, to trust users, to understand how we can share. And so I think the combination of the timing on the one hand and the fact that the mindset of sharing is sort of in the right place brings it to the point where we can make this happen. I don't think we could have done this 5 years ago. I don't think people were ready for it. And when Uber and Lyft got started, people said, what? No one's going to get into a car with a stranger, right? That was one of the pushbacks they got to.
Right.
So they sort of paved the road in many ways, and we're hoping to expand that, definitely going down in terms of the cost, right? We're trying to get to a use case that's much closer to public transit, sort of point-to-point public transit, than a taxi service or a black car service.
Okay, so I've got a few specific questions about the potential for this, some potential pitfalls as well, but let's sort out a few logistics questions here. So it seems like you do want to create a service that doesn't incentivize drivers to make this their job, right? And so what are some things you're doing to make sure that
So it's more than that. Our service is designed specifically so it cannot be your job. If you try to drive on Waze as a service, you will lose money. Okay, so we're not paying more than 54 cents a mile, which is the blended cost of driving a car, the IRS sets that. And so basically you're sharing the cost with the driver. You're not actually creating a profit for the driver. So that goes into taxes, and that goes into the insurance, into a lot of other components. But more than that, if you try to drive for us, again, you'll lose money. We're also limiting the number of drives you can make a day. A driver can only drive twice a day, so home and work. And so it really is not a way to make it's not a way to start a new career in the driving space, right? It's just not going to work financially. At the same time, if you're driving anyway, this is free money. And that's really the thing with the economic efficiency here. It's that. It's the fact that we can take a seat that's empty, put a person in it, and for free get a ride. And that's sort of the magic of the whole thing.
Okay, so obviously, given that, the intersection with Uber and Lyft is somewhat limited because you have to request a ride hours before. In some cases, you're not going to get the ride. I requested a ride yesterday. I wrote a story today about this, and I went from downtown Oakland to downtown San Francisco. I requested about 2 hours before. Friendly guy named Jack Chin, the general manager of San Francisco Government Television, picked me up, drove me across the Bay Bridge to downtown San Francisco. The ride cost me $4.50. The BART cost $3.45, so it was a pretty good deal. And on Lyft or Uber, it was going to be a $15 ride. But for Jack Chin, he got $4.50 out of that. He had to get off the highway, pick me up, go out of his way to drop me off. What's the incentive for Waze drivers to do this?
So I think there are three different types of drivers with different incentives. Here at the Bay, we're kind of living in the future, and we kind of forget that the rest of the world doesn't live like we do. And in most parts of the world, especially in America where there's no public transit, the cost of owning and running a car is very, very significant. If you work in shifts in a hospital, in a factory, there is no public transit option for you because America wasn't built that way. And you have to own a car and drive it, and it's an expensive and a significant part of your disposable income. So that's one group, and we think that's really the core demographic you want to go to. In the Bay, though, getting you on the HOV lane is going to save you 20 minutes. And 20 minutes from San Francisco to Mountain View is probably worth more than the $4.20 to someone here in the Bay. And beyond that, there aren't that many times in life that you can actually help people out without too much of a hassle. And this is really the core of the service. And when you think about Waze, Waze basically allows people to help out other people, whether just by sharing their data, by reporting incidents, or by actually editing the map. And what we see is that people overall want to be on a mission, right? They want to do good for the world, not too much. Right? You don't actually go out of your way, and it's not too far, but you want to go a little bit. And this is what we're hoping to be able to create. You can save the world without too much hassle and make a little money while you're doing it.
Okay, great. So I think the carpool, the HOV lane is obviously very compelling because all of us know how much that could mean, on your commute. In my example, this guy, Jack Chin, he was already driving a compressed natural gas car, so he already could get in the carpool lane. He said he didn't really do it for the money, he just did it for the conversation, actually. Little did he know he was having some dickhead reporter get in and ask him a bunch of questions.
But that's an important point. What we see happening with carpoolers is that it ends up being 4, 5, 6 people who more or less live next to you and work in the same area. And so you actually begin building this micro community of people that you know. Now, today, especially if you drive to work, there's very few times you can meet people that are not from your work or from your direct circle. You meet random people, but they're not that random because they work in the same area that you do, they live in the same area that you do, and it creates these really, really interesting relationships that spring up between people, and those micro communities are a big part of how we see this going forward.
Right, and you even, I can tell on your app now, you encourage people to even request rides from the same people, so you're sort of trying to build that community. Now, Waze, you guys have roughly 80 million users by now, which is obviously a huge number. However, riders is not something you've had in the past. You've always been a driver-based app. So to be a Waze rider, you have to download the Waze Rider app. So there's a few things you have to, kind of hurdles you got to get over to do this. Why, as someone who's carpooling, am I going to be a Waze rider versus just going on a Lyft line or an Uber pool or something like that?
Well, at the core, we expect to be about half the price, to a quarter of the price of Uber or Lyft line. We expect people to use us much more as an everyday drive to work. If you're going out at night and you're about to leave your house, I'm not the best option for you. Uber, Lyft line, these are the great options that give you that point-to-point immediate response. If you're trying to get every day to work from San Francisco to Mountain View, that's the perfect use case for us. Every day we'll take you there. Instead of taking the train, instead of taking the bus with all the challenges around that, we'll give you a relatively door-to-door experience that'll be faster, cleaner, and simpler for you. So I think it's very much about the use case.
Okay.
And we think about sort of the future of transportation. Now, if you go 10 years from now, the average person will not own a car. There'll be very few cars that people will own. Some will, but in the grand scheme of things, there'll be lots of different solutions. We're talking about 2-car families going down to 1-car families, right? Which is, I think, the first change we're going to see, a significant change. But already in San Francisco, you see that, right? If you live in San Francisco today, you don't own a car by definition, right? And that's a big change to where the world was 10 years ago in the US. And we think going forward, you're going to have multiple options. So some areas are going to be public transit. Some areas are going to be services like Via, where you've got like a van that collects people and drops them off. Some areas, the work is going to give you the ride, like Google does and other companies. Some areas you're going to use Uber. Some you're going to use Carpool. I mean, all these different things are going to work together. And today, they're very much driven by people. In the future, they may be driven by robots. But conceptually, you're going to have multiple options to choose. And the difference is going to be price, convenience, pickup, are you alone, is there someone else in the car with you? All these kinds of things are going to play together, which are very personal for each user on each ride. Some rides you want to be by yourself. Some rides you're happy to share with other people. Some rides you care about the price, your everyday rides. And you're going to the prom, you might actually think about it a little differently.
Okay, great. So Waze Carpool launched in Israel in 2015. Late last year, you brought it to the Bay Area. Today I have a story that you're expanding. What are the expansion players, and what are the expansion plans, and where and when can we expect Waze Carpool showing up elsewhere?
So what we've been spending the last almost year and a half is actually working with our users on trying to crack this challenge. And it's a challenge that's also about economic efficiency, also about social interactions, also about quality of service. I mean, there are all these different aspects to the service which have been very, very difficult to get. We've done a pretty good job of making all the possible mistakes. So I can give you a long list of things not to do. There are a few things that are working, but obviously we need more of them. But that's really the luxury we get from being part of Google, is that we don't have the pressure that you guys have of, I need to raise a round in 6 months, I have to show traction. Now, we can take more time there and we can figure it out. And that's what's been holding up our rolling out the service further. We don't want to roll out the service until we feel that we can deliver the quality of service, primarily measured by retention. We're specifically looking at weekly retention and monthly retention. We want to see the retention charts flatten completely, so product market fit. And what we have seen is that the growth side of the story we actually have. Our users opt in, they participate, we can deliver that part, which is usually the bigger challenge. But the core product, getting it right, getting it efficient, and getting it an experience that people enjoy taking, that's been our biggest challenge. That's held us from rolling out. We feel we're getting very close. And so as soon as we feel that our numbers are there, we're going to start opening this up in a wider sense. Okay, great. So given that we have a lot of entrepreneurs here, I said to you in the back, probably to many of them, you're kind of living the dream. You've developed this hugely successful app. You were bought by Google. You've got time and money to figure out this new venture. So obviously, as you said, having Google's backing gives you time that you maybe otherwise wouldn't have. So what would you say to maybe some of the entrepreneurs in the room who maybe don't have that luxury when they're trying to launch this kind of thing about not having that time? How do you handle that? I mean, you were at one point someone like that. So having time is also a problem. Okay. If we had the time at Waze to wait till the product was right, we would have never launched. We would have never gotten there. When we launched our product, it was terrible. It literally didn't work. But we had no choice. That's what we had. That was our product. We had to make it work. We had to get users in. So somehow we made it work at the end. And obviously, looking back, it all sounds like a theory that we knew what we were doing, but in every given moment, we had no idea what was going on. And we stumbled through making this thing work. So I think that's the risk also that you see when you have a situation that you're within Google, that you can take the time. You don't have that external pressure. And that external pressure is actually very good. I see that also with startups that raise too much money, that especially experienced entrepreneurs who today can raise a lot of money in their early rounds, and that becomes a problem. The pressure which you're all feeling and you hate, and I completely understand it, about having to raise money is terrible, but at the same time, it's a real focusing function, and it makes you roll out faster. So I think in our specific case, I think what we're trying to do is very unique to us. A lot of companies have tried to do Carpool, and when you look at the customer acquisition costs today in mobile, there isn't enough money here, even if you take a commission, which we're not taking today, but even if you do, there isn't enough money to actually subsidize a $3, $4 customer acquisition cost. So the fact that we actually have 80 million users every month that use our product is really at the core of the value we bring to the table. The fact that there are people driving every day anyway with Waze, so we can communicate with them to pick someone up, is really the asset that we're trying to leverage in expanding the service and creating Carpool. And this is very different than a startup where you basically have to create both sides of the market. And so this is the asset that we have, and why we're taking our time to do this, because we actually have seen that the growth side we have, and the bigger challenge is getting the product market fit correctly. Okay. So going back to the Carpool for a second, what's your vision for this? I mean, how big can this actually get? And maybe you can talk a little bit about that example you just gave me back there. So it's funny, when we started with Waze, people would ask me the same question. And they'd say, how big is it going to be? And I tell them that someday everyone's going to get in the car and they're going to turn on Waze and they're going to drive with it, even when they know where they're going. And I'd usually get laughed out of the room. People say I'm an idiot, and the whole story. And it was this belief that this is a better way to drive. Now, we've reached a point in the world where in different parts of the world where we literally control traffic. So today, this morning in Israel, one of our employees screwed up and shut down the main highway, which is like the equivalent of shutting down the 101, creating a huge traffic jam on the equivalent of the 280, right? That's the power that we actually have, and that's also the responsibility that we have. Right? Literally, we control traffic. There are areas where our routing, when someone has a bug in the routing server, it'll actually create congestion in a town. We have towns that are furious with us for routing traffic through them and have changed the road signage and the laws in their town so that you can't drive through them. All kinds of crazy stories like that. And that's how when we think about how big this could go, it's a very similar story. We think this is going to be how most people do most of their rides in the future. Now today, so there was this article came out in the Wall Street Journal, and I get an email from the mayor of a small town in Ohio. And it basically writes to me asking if they can be the pilot. And he says, we're a town of 83,000 people. We actually have manufacturing jobs there. These work in 24-hour shifts, right? 3 shifts a day, and there's no public transit. He says, when I speak to the business owners in my town, the number one complaint, except for getting people that can pass a drug test, he really said that. But except for that, is getting them to work, and they have no way of getting there. This is, when I'm thinking about where this goes, I want to service him and his town. I want to service people going every day to their factory to work and saving money on this, not having to spend time, not in traffic, but also not having to drive every day, cutting in half their costs. And I want to give them a way to get to work. And those really are our core demographic. You know, here in Silicon Valley, we'll be the first ones with self-driving cars. Elon Musk will dig tunnels underneath the highways. There'll be flying cars into the city, right? We're going to have all these fancy solutions. That little town in Ohio is not going to have it. And this is where, when you think about where carpool can go, that's where it can go, to the point where everyone has their own public transportation. For us, I really imagine a situation where I'm going to get onto the highway in the morning, I'm going to drive to San Francisco, and it'll take me 30 minutes. And I live in Los Altos. That's what I want to see. I want us to have free-flowing traffic at 9 a.m. And there's now I'm cannibalizing my core business, right? As Waze, my core business is traffic. But we really think that it is possible, and we look at the change we've done in many parts of the world, in many cities. We think that if we can get only the Wazers, only current Waze drivers, if a significant percent of them participate, we can make traffic go away. Woo!
Yes.
You know,
the common enemy of traffic.
Exactly. One of the best things about fighting traffic is that there are no good guys when it comes to traffic. It's like usually when you're fighting something, someone else is getting hurt here. In traffic, it's everyone's enemy, right? It's the number one thing that ruins our quality of life for many, many people. And on top of that, we are the problem, right? Traffic isn't created by aliens. It's created by us driving at the same time. And so we really feel that we can be the solution as well.
Okay. So I'd be remiss not to note that there is a player already in this space in San Francisco, a startup called Scoop, which has some pretty good, pretty good user numbers, and they do background checks essentially. They check the driving history of any drivers who sign up, and Waze does not. So why does Waze decide that anybody who's already a Waze user can just tap his app and give a ride to anybody?
So it's not that simple.
Okay.
We do validate many aspects of your profile, and we share that with the rider. So for example, you have to validate your phone number. You have to log in with Google, and so we get your Gmail address. You have to turn on location history, so we actually know where you've been driving. We suggest that you connect with LinkedIn and Facebook. And we show how many drives you've taken, how long you've been on Waze, how often you drive, a lot of this information. There's a rating system, so you can actually rate the driver and the rider. These systems have worked in most parts of the sharing economy, and we think they can work here as well. Now, if you're out to commit a crime, this is not the best platform for it. There are better platforms for committing crime, like just walking down the street.
Okay.
I mean, but we think about what people want. We want to be able to show you as much of the social information of that user. And you as the rider or the driver see everything about the other party and can decide whether or not to accept it. And so this is really the metric. It's worked in most industries in our space. We think it's going to work here. If we haven't had a pushback from users in terms of asking for this. If they decide that it's a big issue, of course, we'll address it as well. There are obviously APIs for this. And I think what Scoop is doing is great, and we know these guys, and there are a lot of startups trying to do this. There are many different innovative approaches to trying to deal with transportation. And that's what I think makes this time so interesting. So many different startups, large companies, any size company are trying to crack this. Because you got $1 trillion business that's about to go away, but it's about to change dramatically. And frankly, no one knows how it's going to change. So everyone's shot at it is about the same.
So the other thing that is interesting about Waze is that It has such a strong brand, and I think a lot of people in this room realize that Google owns Waze, but I think a lot of people globally don't. And it's, Noam is unusual in the sense that you founded the company, it was bought by Google, but you're still stuck around and you're still running the company. So how does that work? How is that going in Google? Do you have autonomy? I mean, does Larry and Sergey have to sign off on everything, or?
So just to be clear, I wasn't officially a founder. I joined a year after the company was founded.
Okay.
So that's 2009. Don't want to step on anyone's toes there. We've been very lucky. So first of all, I recommend for everyone, if you're going to sell your company to someone, sell it to Google. I mean, we've been very lucky with Google. And I remember when we were going through negotiations to acquire us, and we had this big meeting with Larry and everyone, and Larry said he's going to give us all this autonomy. And we asked for autonomy. We wanted to stay independent. And I remember thinking, he's giving me sort of the management blowjob. Once we get acquired, they'll cut us up and everything, and we'll do what we can. But they've been amazing with us. We have been kept separate and combined where it made sense. So wherever it made sense, Google APIs, access to Google machine learning models, even Google 3 infrastructure, we have access to everything we want. But nothing is forced on us. So we're still independent like a company. We have our own marketing, our own sales, our own biz dev, our own product, our own engineering, our own DevOps. Like, we've kept that part separate. We're in the cloud. We weren't forced to go into the Google 3 infrastructure, but stayed in the cloud. And we're partially on the Google cloud and partially on the Amazon cloud. And we're trading on both clouds. So we've been given all that independence, and it's not a trivial thing to do. A lot of the stuff that we're doing are really hard for a company Google size to swallow, like the fact that someone this morning could delete the highway and had permissions to do that. I mean, there's a lot of the thing when you're a social app and you have a very involved user base, that the users see a lot of information, they are privy to a lot of information, they have capabilities on your system which can be very damaging. How do you manage that risk? And when we were being acquired, one of the biggest risk factors was, how would the community take it? I mean, if we got acquired by Google, the next day the community left, that would have been a pretty bad situation. And we've kept everyone, both internally and in the community, and the core reason is that nothing really changed after the acquisition. They dealt with the same people, they had the same permissions, we kept operating the same way, for better or for worse. And so I think that's what was very unique about Waze, and still is unique. That being said, it's great to have the backbone of Google, the resources of Google for a lot of other things that we're doing. So in some ways, we're living the dream, as you said, that we've got the backing of Google, but yet we're very, very independent. We're not an alphabet company, but we're very independent.
Mm-hmm. Now, I do want the disclaimer here is that it worked out great for Waze, but there are plenty of companies that have not had this sort of independence after they've been purchased by Google, as so often happens with acquisitions.
In most acquisitions.
Yes.
I mean, the whole model of keeping the company independent is a new model. And it started, I guess it started with Instagram and Facebook and
YouTube.
And YouTube.
Yep.
YouTube was partial, but was similar. They kept the brand, but the infrastructure was connected.
Okay.
Instagram was definitely that way at Facebook and WhatsApp. And if you think about Waze and then Nest that came in later, and there's a lot of this independence there's an acknowledgement, I think, today that you're buying a company for more than the sum of its parts. You're buying it for something special, a culture, something that's unique to it, and you want to preserve that. And I think it's been, most of the successful acquisitions have gone down this path, and there've been a lot of bad stories the other way.
Do you still get free lunches at Google campus? I mean,
of course.
All right.
Why did we do the whole acquisition? We get free lunches, organic, locally sustained food.
Probably time for two more quick questions. So what do Larry and Sergey are such, I think, icons in the Valley, but they are sort of enigmatic. We don't see them often. What do they think, and maybe what does Sundar, the Google CEO, think of this Waze carpool service?
So it's interesting. Specifically, Google has a lot of initiatives about the future of transportation. And Waymo is the most famous one, right, about self-driving cars. If you look at Google Maps today, you have multiple options. They're giving you different routing options between subways and Uber and walking and all these different multimodal things. We're doing Carpool. There are a lot of different attempts there. And there is something very deep, I think, in the Google management about this issue of traffic. It's such an inefficient way to manage ourselves, and it's so painful that they're willing to go a long way. And I think they've been really great with us in this. We had support from both Larry and Sergey starting from the beginning when we wanted to go on this, but they also gave us the space and the time. There was no pressure to launch this quickly. We had to iterate, we had to figure it out. And I think that's something very unique about the way we went here. And it's also unique about Google. Google does have the luxury of doing these things. People talk about the moonshots and all these different things that Google does. It can afford to do these things, and it is. The fact that you can afford to be innovative doesn't mean you will be innovative. There are more than enough companies that can afford and are not. But I think at Google, it's very well ingrained into the culture of we want to try new things and new ways of doing things.
Okay, great. So we just got about 40 seconds left. I want to ask you, have you done the Waze Carpool yet?
All the time.
Yeah? Do you pick up people on the way?
All the time. And so when I'm in the US, I drive. When I'm in Israel, I ride.
Okay.
So it's funny. I was actually in Israel. I got a ride with someone to the office. And I always tell them at the end, the CEO. And then that day was like in the paper. You got a ride with the CEO. But of course I use it. I mean, the only way, if anyone here does not use their own product, you should stop doing whatever you're doing.
All right, good advice. All right. Thank you very much. Noam Bardin, everybody.
Thank you.